Wanna talk? So let's talk. Here, talk. You wanna talk? You gotta talk. You need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk. You wanna
Good evening and welcome. It's Talk to Solomon time. My co-host, my friend Brent Johnson from freedomradio.us. Brent, you with us?
Yes, I am, and I'm enjoying this today, Stan, for sure.
All right. We now have, of course, Dr. Alan Keyes, the long-awaited and much-debated champion of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Alan, how are you tonight?
I'm doing okay, Stan. How about you?
Couldn't be better. Couldn't be better because on the way over here, I actually was able to rearrange the flight path of a liberal. I need to shut up. I'm gonna get in trouble. All right, let us start.
Now you've tantalized us all with
There
this
you go. All right, I can just say this. I drive a substantial vehicle with a condom on the bumper just in case someone crosses in front of me for whom I don't want to brake. I have a video I'd like to play, and we'll start with a comment on this. We have some topics we're going to talk about. In the last half hour, we're going to talk about an incredible plan to save America from left or lefter, and Alan will lead us in that discussion. But let's start with this video. Please watch, folks. What you're seeing is a young lady who is a state champion runner who was running in her second race, one that she really wasn't trying to win. And the person in front of her ran out of gas, the lady. And so rather than pass her, which she could easily have done, even though she wasn't going to win the race, she stopped, helped her to the finish line, and then made sure she crossed the lady that had collapsed, crossed in front of this lady who had won the previous race and was, in fact, the state champion. Now, many argue motivation. I don't. I believe we simply saw a situation that no one planned. We saw a person that knows right from wrong. We had a situation where one person doing one act had a chance to reaffirm there is good and non-selfish and I give a damn in the world. And in fact, what she did would have disqualified her, but they didn't disqualify her, and good for them. So let me start with you, Alan. You know, I like good stories. I like good endings. I like feeling good. This is not changing the world, but you know what? There's some happiness this brought and some confidence this engendered. Do you agree?
I do. I think that we need reminders every now and again, especially these days in America, of what was once considered to be the really important vocation of sports. And it wasn't to win victories at sports so that you can get money and make commercials and get more money and become more famous and get some more money. It was actually intended to build character. And when you say build character, you mean build the kind of character that you want to see in your children when they grow up to be your citizens, in your citizens as they face the responsibilities of citizenship, caring not only for themselves, but for others in their community and for their community as a whole. And building that kind of character was once considered to be the most significant result of sports programs, especially when you had them at educational institutions, when they involved the young and so forth. And I think that we have, in the course of our society's life now, pretty much abandoned that understanding. We've allowed all kinds of other considerations to overtake it. And yet at the end of the day, Stan, the things that are really most inspiring about sports do not have to do with all the money and fame. They have to do with those moments when what comes through from an athlete, from a team, is the fact that in working at that sport, they have developed the kind of character that we cannot help in our hearts but admire. And I think that that's proof positive of what we really believe to be the final and most important goal of participation in sports.
Brad?
Yeah, I agree with everything, as always, that Alan says. And I would add to that sports is supposed to be about the pinnacle of achievement, regardless of what the sport is or what the competition is. It's about achievement. It has become about winning. When winning is the primary objective, you will do anything to win. And so you will lie, you will cheat, you will steal, etc., etc. You will break the rules because it's all about winning. When it's about achievement, that is doing the best you can do in a given task, in a given sport, in a given competition, then you don't go out there and cheat because you're only cheating yourself. It comes back down to the value systems. Winning has been, same thing in the court system. It's about winning, not about justice. In these things, it's about winning, not about achievement. We need to, if we're to save our country, we need to get back to being able to conduct these types of events with integrity, where it is about achievement, not about winning. When it's about achievement, you can actually acknowledge both the winner and the loser for their respective achievements. When it's about winning, somebody's got to lose.
Well said. Now, speaking of losers and losers, there's a fellow named Daniel Rios. Daniel is a middle-aged guy who has a long criminal record, whose idea of a vocation is to get up, go to a neighborhood, knock on doors, and if nobody answers the door, break in the house and steal what he can. Well, Daniel knocked on a door there in New Jersey, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and a 92-year-old woman answered the door. So he shoved his way in, he strangled her to death, and he stole the change she had in her house. Now, that in and of itself is horrendous. One might ask, how did they find him? And the answer is, everybody had seen him. Everyone knew he was breaking into houses. He had a long record, and the question to me is, why was Daniel Rios free to walk around and break in houses and strangle this lady, this 92-year-old, but vibrant, active, still got around, lived by herself, was able to do stuff, and steal her life and some change? I'll start with you, Alan.
Well, I think one of the problems we have had for the longest time, really almost throughout my adult lifetime, is that folks have looked upon what is going on in our courts and in our legal system as if we are dealing with something that has to be judged in light of all the underlying social circumstances and this, that, and the other thing. I think one of the major reasons, especially that you incarcerate people, is to keep them off the street so that they can't be harming other folks. I remember the fact that when somebody like Rudy Giuliani took over in New York, he implemented a program that was simply aimed at arresting people when they committed infractions, right? And it turned out that that simple change, where you didn't look the other way while people were doing things they shouldn't, carrying weapons when they shouldn't have them, stealing, robbing, doing other things, but you actually put people in jail and did your best to keep them there, had a significant effect on lowering the crime rate. Because I think that at the end of the day, it is both as an effect of that kind in the community, as well as a deterrent, as well as a defense of the integrity of the law, that the system of law enforcement exists. It is, at the end of the day, the first task of that law enforcement, which is to secure those who are trying to live decently, to do right, against those who are not inclined to do so and habitually cross the line. And I think that's why we feel particularly badly when we see a case like this, where somebody who has been a known offender is still on the streets and ends up doing this kind of tragic harm.
Brent?
Yeah, every time I hear a story like this, it comes back down to I believe in God, and I believe in God's law, and God's law is very clear. This man should die, period. Period. He should not be put in prison where the taxpayers have to give him 3 square meals a day. He should die. He should lose his life. I don't care if he had some kind of a bad childhood, or his father beat him, or his mother raped him, or anything like that. That may have happened. It doesn't change the fact as to what he's done. I think that we have become this society, okay, where, again, politics trumps justice. And I think we need to get back to justice. If this man has a long record, then he should have been sitting in jail for the record. If he's killed somebody, he should have had his life taken from him before he got to kill another person. I don't know what his history is, but for him to be out on the streets and have the ability to do what he did is just plain wrong. And I'm not interested, okay, in the reasoning behind it. Yes, we are supposed to rehabilitate our prisoners and not punish them. That is what we're supposed to do. But it seems very clear that we did not do that with this person. So again, the judicial system has failed miserably.
Agree with both of you. Now, we have all been bombarded with pictures and stories about the cannibal, the gay porn star cannibal, the master of the guy was on the loose for 3 days and they caught him. He was nothing other than a sick, disgusting pig who killed his gay boyfriend and cut him up and mailed his body parts to politicians and put some post here and there to say, oh, I'm bad, I'm bad. You know, I don't know if you remember that movie where Richard Pryor and that curly-headed white guy, whatever his name was, were put in prison, and one was, puny and the other was punier, and they kept walking around, I'm bad, and then somebody came around and sneezed and they passed out. Somehow, because this guy is an effeminate, homosexual, porn star, anti-God, anti-moral, anti-everything, that they wanted to make him a cult hero. I think we should make him a lampshade. Now, that's a little mean, because no lamps have done anything to me, but he murdered his boyfriend and cut his body up. That's it. End of story. Your ticket is punched. You blew your franchise, and now they simply put you in a hole and drop in a cobra or something. Am I being a little hard on this guy, Dr. Keys? Just a minute, I'm not hearing Dr. Keys.
I don't think that you're being hard on this guy, Stan. I think that in more ways than we realize, though, as a society, we've allowed the ethos that is being forced upon us by a bunch of self-worshipping, self-idolizing elites to destroy our common sense and to break down the basic prerequisites of maintaining, I think, a strict sense of decency in the society as a whole, and makes keeping order extremely hard. That's why I think it's difficult, because there you are talking about this man and his involvement in pornography and so forth. And there are some people, Stan, I'm sorry, who would just sit there and say, well, everybody's entitled to their lifestyle, Stan. And people have different sexual orientations, and we should understand this. And you watch, and it goes over into the popular culture. You'll see it on television shows and so forth, whereas it can be detectives on a police force or whatever are exploring the different varieties of criminal actions and activities. They will move through the haunts of the various lifestyles and run across the sadomasochists and other people like this who are looking for their gratification using violence and near-death experiences. And the fact that we have been willing kind of blithely to act as if that introduction of violence into what is supposed to be the sacred activity of procreation, that substitution of all kinds of however derived pleasure for what was at the end of the day intended to be a humanity and species-oriented activity. We think that doesn't matter. We think that just erasing all those lines has no consequences. But I think the great problem is, Stan, that when you have lifted all of those lines, what are you depending on to make sure that people don't cross the lines that no longer exist? See, because if the lines no longer exist, how do you know when you've crossed them? And when you habitually are engaging in actions and activities that move further and further and further down the line of various forms of depravity and violence, how are you to judge and be judged when you cross the line into that kind of depravity which goes beyond the lifestyle? Is it just because when we hear about it on TV, we'll all be revolted? Because at the end of the day, I don't know whether that kind of reactionary basis for maintaining moral discipline is going to work very well. It's going to require an awful lot of sacrificial victims. And I think that's why, in general, you look at the course of human history, societies didn't adopt that approach to their understanding of moral boundaries. It wasn't a kind of, well, you'll know you've crossed it when we all start to vomit and throw up and throw stones. You'll know you've crossed it. They tried to learn from experience, and applying that experience, set down lines and boundaries so that some kinds of what we would call lifestyles were on the right side of that boundary and other kinds were on the wrong side, so that people wouldn't be tempted to start down the slippery slope of depravity and end up in this kind of a cesspool of violence and murder. But we've stepped away from that common sense of civilization. And in the process, Stan, I think we are stepping away from civilization itself. And this kind of episode is like a warning punctuation mark that ought to wake us up to this fact. But you know, Stan, people will talk about it and they'll go on and tut-tut about it. And how many of them will make the connection between this kind of an episode and the fact that we are assaulting the right understanding of marriage, that we are assaulting any sense that there is a proper way to approach human procreation and sexual activity, that we are introducing a kind of vapid relativism in every facet of life that then erases all the lines and boundaries and leaves us in a position where there's no kind of prior restraint being built into the soul and psyche of individuals in the society. How many people are really thinking that through, Stan, when they greet a monstrous episode like this? Because if they were, I don't think they'd be accepting so much drivel from folks who pretend to be leaders and academics, who are in fact abandoning the deep common sense of mankind so that we can be abandoned to a future in which there is no longer a line between decency and depravity.
I couldn't agree with you more. Brent?
I think there are three elements here. First element is the word gay means merry and light-hearted. I object to homosexuals prettying up their behavior by calling it gay. If you want to be a homosexual, call it for what it is, homosexuality. Second item is the crime. The crime itself, what I said before, stands here. The man committed a crime, you punish him for the crime. He took a life, or two or three, in parts, you take his life. End discussion. Alan has brought up the third element, and I think he is so right on, and that is society's complicity in this type of depravity. Society is not innocent here. You know, and I'm not saying that society is to blame for what this man did, but society has definitely contributed. And when I say society, I don't just mean the government. I don't just mean the globalists who have blurred the lines of moral standards. I mean the people themselves who have accepted this blurring of the lines. The people themselves who have said, oh, yeah, well, you know, I saw on CNN, you know, some expert said that we're not supposed to judge other people, so I guess, you know, they can do what they want. No. The society is the people themselves. And the people have accepted this humanistic approach in which everything is okay from somebody's perspective. Nobody wants to offend anybody. Everybody wants to be liked. And personally, I'm sick of it. It makes me want to vomit because it is that societal complicity that opens the door and even invites this kind of sickness. This kind of sickness would not exist if people ostracized people who just started to show signs of such depravity. You know, a few hundred years ago, if you lied, people would have nothing to do with you. They wouldn't do business with you. They wouldn't talk with you. They wouldn't be your friends. Essentially, you would be ostracized. What did that do? It made people think twice about lying. If this kind of garbage, just when it starts to rear its ugly head, if people were to sit there and say, we won't accept this, we will not have it, you are not part of our society, then people would think twice before they would go down these depraved paths. So there's no question in my mind that society itself, and I mean by that the people, have some kind of complicity in this type of occurrence.
Well said. All right, let me shift gears and talk about the recall in Wisconsin, where the governor, the lieutenant governor, and 4 Republican senators are facing a recall election. I don't know the results yet. I don't think they're in yet. They just closed the polls, I believe, if they've even closed them, because it's only 7:20 in Wisconsin. They may have closed them at 7 o'clock. They may go open till 8. I don't know. But I do think the significance of this election is worthy of discussion. Now, we're going to talk about a way to, redo and give back control of our politics to we the people. But in this specific election, where basically it's a, in my mind, a contest between the left and the center, not even the right, those who believe that we the people have to do what we're told, and that those selected by government, specifically public sector union workers, can have what they want, and there's nothing we can do about it or say about it. I'll start with you, Alan.
Well, Stan, I think that the whole situation in Wisconsin has to be looked at in the context of what I deeply feel to have been and to remain a moral reaction of Americans at the grassroots against the irresponsible approach to governing that has resulted in the financial crisis, the fiscal crisis, the deep indebtedness of our country. And I think that Governor Walker, because of the courage that he showed in standing by his guns, in dealing with that crisis in a way that made it clear that first and foremost, there had to be an example set from people who are in the public service. And I think that this is one of the things, I've written about it on my blog and in other places, that we can't afford to lose sight of. We have allowed government jobs to be turned essentially into a big patronage farm, into something that's being handed out to people like some kind of entitlement in exchange for their political support and things of this kind. And therefore, of course, Stan, since it's in the nature of a reward for political activity or favors or whatever, you're not going to demand sacrifice from people. I think it's kind of sad. At one time, the idea of public service meant that if you went to work for the government, you understood that when times got hard, the people who are in the public's service would be the first ones who would be asked to set the example of sacrifice. That's been stood on its head in our time. And you now have us in a position where folks in the government are outstripping those who are not in the government in terms of their remuneration. That has everything turned the wrong way round. And I'll have to tell you, I think everybody, both parties, all these people down through the years of my life have contributed to this mentality that somehow or another, government service and private service should be regarded as the same in terms of wages and all that. I don't think that's true. Well, I know for a fact when I went into government service, I went in because I thought about my life and I said, I really I'm not saying here that I didn't want to have a comfortable life, take care of my family and all of that, but I also thought that there were things that I considered more important than just that money. So I wasn't somebody who saw myself as just going into the private sector and making money and living well off that money. I went into government service because I wanted to serve the public good. And I think that that's a standard that ought to be applied, and it has a fiscal consequence. And I think Scott Walker stood up for that consequence. And his opponents, because this has been particularly true of the Democrat Party, have been fighting for what essentially amounts to that corrupt patronage understanding of government employment. And I think that it's all something that has no proper place in a representative government, where the government is not supposed to be a tool of the selfish interest and ambition of politicians. It's supposed to be an instrument for the public good, for the common good. And if you come into difficult times, that instrument for the common good hunkers down, performs its function, and the people who are performing that function ought to know good and well that if sacrifice is going to be required of the society as a whole, they're the first ones who will have to set the example. And if you don't want to be in that position, you shouldn't go to work for the government. And I am praying that folks in Wisconsin will ratify what has been that moral sensibility, that moral outrage that I think has been part of the Tea Party movement, part of the reaction against the deficit and the scandalous indebtedness of the country, and I think was part of the admiration in the reaction for the courage that Governor Walker showed.
Brent? Brent? We lost Brent?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm right there. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree to a certain extent. I do agree that Governor Walker showed courage in his position regarding the fiscal responsibilities of the chief executive of the state, I completely stand with him on that. I do think that the governor and many others, not just in this state but in other states, have forgotten that there are limitations on what they can do. But in this particular case, I think that Walker has done quite well. The problem here is the unionization of government positions. Most people don't realize it, but legally speaking, unions are considered to be a government privileged program. In other words, one day Congress got together and passed a law that said you can have unions. That means that unions are under the purview of Congress. They are not an unalienable right. They are a government privilege. And what's happened with the unionization of government positions, whether it's the teachers union or the sanitation union or whatever, it doesn't matter. The government unionization essentially means that the government is extending privileges that it created to its own employees. Somewhere in there is a conflict of interest, and it should not exist. I do not believe that government positions under any circumstance should ever be unionized. Okay, if you don't like it, don't work for the government, like Alan says. You don't want that? Go work in the private sector. Go get a real job. The other element here, and I think it's fascinating, is while I believe the American system is the single best system of government when it is run by just and moral people, I think that there's one thing that's lacking that is not lacking in the parliamentary system, which pretty much occupies much of the rest of the world. In parliamentary systems, there is a process called a no-confidence vote, where if an executive, like a prime minister, is just not doing a good job, they can vote him out. They don't have to wait for election day to get him out. And while I completely support Governor Walker in this situation, I do think that we would be a lot better off if there was a protocol in all the states and in Washington especially for no confidence votes. Yeah, we might see a lot of them, but maybe there should be a lot of them. I happen to be in favor of the no confidence vote process because it holds an elected official. It holds him right to the, right to the will of the people. If you don't do what you said you're going to do, we don't have to wait 4 years to get you out. Now, I don't think Walker should be kicked out here. care, but I like the idea of no confidence votes.
Well, that's what a recall is. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back, and Alan's going to explain to us how our system was designed and how we can return to the original plan. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Do you like to eat? I do. We all run to the store if we're hungry, right? Well, there are times when that doesn't work. And for those times, and it may be for an hour, and it may be for a day, and it may be for a week, who knows, God's in charge, you need to have quality food. Alpine Air, that's what this is, quality food. It has extended shelf life, and it tastes great. You should store what you eat and eat what you store. Just go to cpnlive.com, click on the icon for the Alpine Air foods. It's incredibly reasonable. It's actually a way to save money. Alpine Air has quality food that's going to be there when you need it. It's always better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Alpine Air at cpnlive.com. Click on the icon and protect your family. I am holding in my hand a product. It's called TR10 Supercolloidal Silver. It's a natural antibiotic that works. You know, the reason we use silver to make cutlery, silverware, is because nothing grows on silver. It's the reason they put it in your teeth. It's the reason they use silver instruments to operate on the brain. TR10 is very inexpensive. Just go to cpnlive.com, click on the icon for the TR10, and order a quart. It's so inexpensive, it's really silly, but it's invaluable when you have a sore throat, when you have a cold, when you have something you're concerned about in yourself, your child, whether you have to spray it in your eyes or swallow it or put it on your skin, makes no difference. It's totally safe. It has less silver than is the safe level in drinking water, yet it's done in such a way that it does the job. A natural antibiotic, yours, TR10, Supercolloidal Silver, from cpnlive.com. Just click on the icon. Do you like being healthy? I do. In fact, this product, which I've been taking for years now, is absolutely the answer. Now, you may not believe it, but I'm actually 21, plus tax, of course. This product has 146 different healthful nutrients in it, and it's liquid, so it's bioavailable. It tastes great, and it's sugar-free. 1 ounce of Sonic Life each day will help you to maintain and enhance your health. It's a kind of a gift, well, that you'll thank your mom for, your husband for, your wife for, your kids for. Whoever you give it to, they're going to say thank you, and you are going to enjoy the benefits of having all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the nutrients your body needs in one very reasonably priced product. Just go to cpnlive.com and everything's right there. You'll be able to read all the ingredients. The price is right there, a flat price delivered to your door anywhere in the United States of America. Sonic Life is a gift, a great gift. Give it to yourself. I do.